Good evening. This is Sandra Roberts calling calling because I'm not calling, am I? Standing in for Mayor McCormick, who's a little under the weather tonight. And also I'll note that Councillor McBain is away on personal business. And so we'd like to open this special meeting of the Kimberley Council held tonight, March the 4th, at the Council Chamber in Kimberley. And this meeting is now in order. We'd like to recognize right off the bat that we are doing our business on the traditional land of the Ktunaxa, and this is where the city of Kimberley resides. Do you have any late items this evening, Maurice?
There is no late item, Madam Acting Mayor.
All right, thank you. Could I have somebody who wishes to adopt the agenda, please? Councillor Cairns, if first, and Councillor Boyer seconds. Thank you very much. All in favor? And carried. This evening, we are privileged to have a wonderful presentation. I'm sure it's probably going to pin our ears back after we hear everything they have to say, because this is a world big plan of the Parks and Facilities Master Plan. And so it's a long time coming, and a lot of work's been done to make this presentation. So we would like to invite the principals of the RC strategies, and that is Stephen Sluda and Fiona Bell. The two of them are going to take us through this Parks and Facility Master Plan presentation this evening. Welcome, you two.
Great, thanks for having us. Probably should have confirmed this before, but should I share the PowerPoint on my end, or would administration like to do that from in the room there? What's best for you?
We actually have it in our decks in front of us. Is it easier for you to do it from there and move us through, or shall we just follow you through?
You know, why don't I share it? If it's okay, if I can share it on the screen, and then that gives me something to refer to, and we can all be looking at the same slide, if that's okay.
That works. Whatever works best for you. We're good.
Great, sounds good. Just please bear with me for 2 secs here. Okay, I can see it on the screen in the room there, so assuming everybody there can as well. So awesome. Yeah, so great introduction, and thanks for that. And in terms of the agenda here this evening, really threefold. First, we'll just start off by giving you a bit of an update on the status of the project. So we've certainly made a lot of progress and undertaken a lot of work since we've last presented to you. Still a little bit more road to cover here, but we're making good progress, and we just wanted to provide you with a bit of an update on that. The last time we had met, we had introduced a prioritization process or approach and left you with a little bit of homework to do to help us refine some of the criteria and the weighting associated with those criteria. So we want to share that with you and how that's advanced here this evening as well. And then the majority of our discussion or our time or review here will be to go over some preliminary key strategies, and really given us a big chunk of your time. So we're expecting the presentation to be about half an hour, and then discussion will be as long as you want it to be. And if we wrap up in the hour, then great. If we want to go beyond that, that's really up to members of council. So first, just to give you, sorry.
I was just going to say thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. And yeah, I apologize, can't be there in person here this evening. Definitely always prefer to do that, and we'll be there in person for subsequent presentations for the final couple presentations. So yeah, just apologies that can't be there right in council chambers here this evening. So in terms of the project progress here, spend a few minutes on that, and I think it's always beneficial at every time we meet just to go over the master plan objectives and essentially This is what you had outlined in the RFP document that we responded to in terms of what you're looking to get out of the master plan here. And I think there's kind of two buckets of work ultimately. First is to review the current state of parks and recreation facilities to understand, the good, bad, and ugly, if you will. And we've spent a number of months doing that. And I think we have a pretty good handle on the situation. And then the second bucket of things to do is to establish some high-level priorities. And that has a number of things under it. Obviously, we need to identify and validate future steps that are required. So, of course, a master plan isn't just something that you necessarily put shovels into the ground with the next day. There's potentially some other layers of planning, and we have identified that in the master plan, or we certainly will as we have the draft master plan. The master plan can ultimately provide you as decision makers at council and your administration with a resource that can inform your future budgeting and other planning. And then ultimately, the master plan can also provide you with guidance on other key issues and topics. And some of those were identified in the RFP. Some of those have emerged through the research and engagement that we've done. As is the case in every community, there's always things that are kind of bubbling up or need some guidance on, and the master plan's intended to do that. So how did we learn about the current state of parks and recreation facilities in the community? Well, we did a bunch of research and engagement, and this graphic is really just summarizing how we went about doing that. So we engaged with the general public through surveys. We engaged with community organizations through a number of discussion sessions, as well as a survey. We've engaged directly with youth. And then there's a number of other different points of research that we do as well. We look at trends and best practices. We look at benchmarking Kimberley, contrasting service levels in Kimberley to other communities. We review how services are currently provided. How do you actually provide those parks, rec, and culture programs and opportunities? We look at your facility utilization. That gives us an indication of which facilities are maybe, at overcapacity or potentially underused as well. We look at current infrastructure, and then we also look at population and demographics. So kind of use all this information. It goes into sort of that proverbial funnel, and that helps us get a handle on really what the situation is. All of that information is contained in this report here. So this research and engagement summary report, which I believe was circulated to you. This is kind of the Bible of everything we've learned so far, and this will ultimately be a background document to the master plan. And the last time we met with you, we presented some key findings from the engagement mostly. So all that information in great detail is provided in this document. So what are our next steps before we get into talking more about where we're at with the master plan? Well, coming out of this this evening here, we're going to continue to advance the draft master plan and have that to you in about a month's time, and that will give you something really tangible to chew on. So this evening we're really going to be focusing on some of the key, again, kind of big moves or big ideas, as we like to call them, and test those with you. But we will have a comprehensive master plan to you relatively shortly. From there, we then go to community review and get feedback from the different members of the public and organization representatives to see, kind of use them as a bit of a filter or lens on what we're recommending, and certainly share back what we've learned as well, so that they understand the process that got us to the master plan. And then the final step is presenting a draft master plan to council. So that's a very quick update on where we're at with the process and where we need to go here moving forward. And the next section of the presentation here is just to dig a little bit more into the prioritization approach. So just a refresher on what the prioritization approach is, or a bit of context on it. We ultimately, and you've tasked us with doing this, we want to make sure that the recommendations in the master plan are data-driven, they're transparent, they're defendable. They're not just, the opinion of council or the opinion of the consultants or the opinion of a few special interest groups, that they have good benefits-based cost-benefit rationale behind them. And that's why we've developed the approach we have, so that is ultimately kind of where the recommendations stem from. And at the last time we met with you, we presented some draft criteria and we asked you for some feedback on that. So this graphic just really illustrates the prioritization approach. And there's 3 steps essentially behind that approach. First step, we do a bunch of research and engagement. So again, we're trying to understand the current state, the good, the bad, and ugly, what the gaps are, what's undersupplied, oversupplied, and so forth. From there, we then take that whole laundry list of amenity types. And in the survey, as an example, we provided respondents to the survey with a pre-populated list of amenity types and asked for their input on what the priorities should be. But we take that kind of laundry list of amenity types and we use a set of criteria and we actually score them and rank those amenity types. And then the third step is actually to transition that into some actual strategies, recommendations, actions, next steps that you can move forward with, because you can't just take a laundry ranked list and kind of tick it off like a shopping list. You actually have to put some real world kind of lens to that. So the criteria, these are the criteria that we asked for some feedback on, and we've established some weighting for them. So just a bit of a refresher on kind of how that works. So every amenity type gets scored using each of these different criteria. So the score is a 3-point scale that gets times by the weighting value. So all these criteria are really important, but the weighting suggests that some are maybe a little bit more important than others. So the score gets times by the weighting value, which equals a score for that criteria. And then we repeat that process for every criteria and every amenity, and that adds up to a total score for that amenity type, which we'll show you on a subsequent slide here. So just to walk through the criteria again, resident preferences. So the point of reference on that is the resident survey. So what residents think is most important, we've weighted the highest here. There's a number that have a weighting value of 3 here, so very important as well. Taxpayer impact. So let's look at kind of that aggregate of the capital and operating costs. So essentially, what would be the impact on ratepayers? The multi-purpose capability of a facility. So is a facility able to suit multiple activities, multiple ages, interests, and so forth? That's that criteria there. Stakeholder and user group preference. So what do groups tell us was important? Financial barriers to entry and use. So is an amenity type typically able to be accessed at no or a low cost, or is there a significant cost to access that amenity type? So that's obviously very important in terms of equity and inclusion as well. Utilization and trends weighted at 2 here. So that's some of the data points on how well current facilities are used. Existing provision responsibility refers to, are you already in the business of providing that amenity? There's some amenities that frankly, there's a significant cost to sort of get out of the business of doing that. So we need to kind of weigh that in as a criteria. Environmental impact. So that reflects, does a facility, is it sort of the gas guzzling car? Does it use a lot of energy and water and so forth relative to others? And then economic benefits is the last criteria that we've included as well. And essentially that refers to, does the amenity draw significant levels of non-local spending and tourist visitation to the community? So again, all these criteria, really important. We're just suggesting through the weighting that some are weighed a little bit higher than others. And the other thing to remember here as well is that some of these are intended to be a little bit of an offset or a screen. So I'll use taxpayer impact as an example. So there's going to be amenity types that are really expensive to build and or operate. So for that amenity type to score really high on the rank list, it would need to score high in a number of these other different amenity types to kind of overcome being really expensive to provide. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, that essentially the lists that we'll show you on a few slides, those amenities will have scored high on most of these, and the more expensive amenities would have had to overcome the scoring low on the taxpayer impact, if that makes sense. So again, we asked you for your feedback the last go around here as well, and the graph on the left here is what you told us. So we challenge you to I think you could choose up to 5 of these criteria that you thought as council members were most important, and the top couple that just about all of you or all of you indicated were very important were multi-use capability. So can that amenity type serve a whole bunch of aegis interests, different types of activities, programmed and spontaneous? As an example, taxpayer impact, and I would expect this from council, came out as a really highly ranked criteria as well. Utilization and trends and stakeholder and user group preferences were picked by the majority. And then it kind of drops off a little bit from there. So 3 of you chose economic benefit. So that kind of that tourism lens, environmental impacts, resident preference. 2 indicated financial barriers to use, and 1 selected existing provision responsibility. The graph on the right there, and I apologize, it's probably a little bit hard to see, and I also swapped this out, so it's probably a little bit different than the one you have in your slide deck provided before. We asked a number of questions around prioritization and values, and thinking about this a bit earlier today, I thought this was a better one. Oh, sorry, let's go back here. We asked residents a very similar question around prioritization criteria, and as you'd probably expect, majority of residents indicated that demand from the community should be the most important criteria. I think we'd expect residents to say that. And then they also indicated that potential cost savings through grants and overall cost of operating the facility was really important, kind of so on and so forth. And if we go down to the very bottom of this, and again, I apologize, it's hard to see on the screen there. What residents said were kind of pretty low priorities is aligning with priorities of the city. So things that are reflected in other strategic planning, geographic balance throughout the city. And then the third kind of last one there, so not as important for most residents or some residents, was ability to generate economic benefit, so tourism and things like that. Again, we probably expect residents to say that because they're thinking maybe a little bit more about kind of localized use, but kind of interesting to contrast the different responses. Maybe I'll just pause there for any kind of questions or reaction to this, or any kind of questions on sort of or perspectives on the criteria here. This surprise anybody? Anybody kind of surprised what other council colleagues had to say? Okay.
No, I
sorry.
think it's a lot to digest all the way through, and I know as I was going over it on the weekend, I was thinking to myself that I was trying to determine where there was any old outstanding things that surprised me, but each one was slightly different than I thought, but that's just the way it is. Not that it's so bold that I have to question it.
Okay, great.
But
We
there's-
can, there's any
so
other
we're good to-
questions?
We're good to proceed.
Okay, great.
Oh, sorry, Don, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your hand up, Don.
That's okay, thank you. I guess just one comment with respect to kind of the taxpayer impact, and that is that we need to look at this from two different points of view. The first is the cost of the amenity itself and the impact on taxes, but also that none of this is in isolation, and we have to look at all the other priorities that we have that are vying for that tax money. And so it's a relatively complicated balancing act, and I think it's going to be important for us to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, great point. And the challenge of any planning process is that it's done a little bit in isolation of broader or other service areas. But certainly as council members, like you can't think of it that way either. So I certainly appreciate that perspective. Okay. Moving along here. So scoring results. So use that criteria to generate a rank list of indoor and outdoor priorities. And I mean, there's a number of different ways to look at this. You can look at it, and we've kind of identified it sort of 1 through 31. The other way would be to put this into kind of buckets where you look at sort of where there's delineations, where there's sort of gaps between the scoring. Again, this isn't intended to be sort of the shopping list that you just kind of move forth and start ticking off. This is an initial point of reference for us to start to generate some strategies with and kind of see where everything sort of shakes out. So, certainly as I look at this on the indoor side of things, court sports scored out quite highly. I think this would validate that ice arenas or arenas in general, however we want to refer to it, is kind of something that's a top priority for a lot of number of reasons, including the fact you're in that business. It's an aging facility, and it's something that a lot of kind of groups and residents are keen on seeing provided moving forward, and recognizing that you have to make a decision around that. Fitness and wellness, art creation spaces, before and after school facilities, libraries scored up quite highly, and then you can kind of see sort of on from there. And then on the outdoor side of things, I mean, there's obviously a lot of trails emphasis here. So we look at kind of the second, third, and fourth there, all varying types of trails. The first is obviously kind of that outdoor sort of event, amphitheater, band shelter type of space. So I think what's important to reflect on here too is that just because something's in this list doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be kind of incrementally supplied. It just reflects that it's a high priority for investment, either to sustain or to add incremental supply to. So the other part of this too is just because something's a little bit lower on the list doesn't mean it's not important. This isn't a value exercise. We're not saying that because something's low doesn't mean that it's not important to provide. It might be low because it's already sufficiently provided and there doesn't need to be any more investment in that amenity. And I just think that's important to consider as well. So that leads us into the key strategies here. Sorry, I'm just going to try to get the screen. I lost the video here, so I can't see any of you anymore. Not used to using WebEx. Nobody uses WebEx anymore. You guys are an outlier in kind of the WebEx world. So, all right, there we go. Great. Okay. So that leads us into the key strategies, and I'll just quickly go back to this graph or this image here. So the scoring results that we just went through, that was that list. So we use the criteria, we score and rank all those amenities, and again, we need to then turn those into some strategies. And why do we need to turn those into some strategies? Well, we need some tangible actions and tactics. So we can't, again, just take that list and kind of use that as a shopping list. We need to apply other context and factors. And there's a bunch of things there. There's resource realities, there's land, what do you have available for land? There's amenity synergies. Some of those amenities you wouldn't just develop in isolation, you develop them as part of some sort of multi-amenity type configuration. We need to achieve the master plan objectives by providing you sufficient move forward guidance. If we just gave you that rank list, that's not going to be very helpful for you as council members. We need to actually make it kind of come to life a little bit as well. And also we need to ensure that we are providing kind of that mix of projects and ongoing management strategies. So there's the capital, and then the master plan also needs to provide some guidance on how to just optimize service delivery, because that's part of the mix as well, and that'll also support good planning moving forward, so that the master plan is kind of a living document that you can use effectively. So it's in red here because ultimately we just want to test some key strategies with you today. So what we're going to show you here on the following slides, it's not certainly all the strategies that you're going to see when we come back to you with the draft master plan. There's going to be a lot more than this, but just with the time we have, we just really want to focus in on some key ones that are we think are important to get your feedback on. So there's 3 strategy categories. So I'm just going to walk through each of these because they pertain to how we've organized some of these strategies that we want to share with you and get your feedback on tonight. The first one is invest to sustain. So what we're suggesting there is that those strategies and actions that fit under that, we're sustaining current service levels. So if we have 2 of something right now, we're suggesting that you would have 2 of something moving forward. And that might mean that you need to replace something. It might mean that you need to kind of refresh something because it's nearing the end of life, or it requires some life cycle investment. But essentially the number that you have now, we're suggesting that the strategies for the amenities that fit under there, carrying that forward. The next bucket is to increase or enhance investment. So we're providing a higher level of service for strategies that fit under this bucket here. So we need to invest. If we already provide that amenity, we need to invest to sustain what already exists or replace what already exists when it's at the end of its lifespan. Plus, we need to invest incrementally to provide a higher level of service, and that could be quantity or quality. So it may mean more of something, it may mean quite a bit better of something, or both. And then the last bucket of strategies are management strategies. So these aren't necessarily capital. They're strategies and tools to help you optimize how you provide services, how you plan for the future, things that you can use to help inform decision making as a resource in the master plan moving forward. And that includes some recommended policy and planning to undertake moving forward. And there actually is a fourth category that we didn't explicitly put on here, but it may relate to the first two here, which is that another category could be decreasing service. So if you decide that you want to increase or enhance investment in amenity, that might mean you need to decrease service levels in another. And we don't see anything obvious where that's required at this time, but it's something that we may want to discuss a little bit in the master plan, is decreasing or divesting out of an area of the recreation and parks business, if you will. But again, we don't see anything that kind of fits there right now, but I just did want to mention that that could be a fourth category. So investing to sustain. We have a handful of key strategies to test with you here this evening. And the first is around arenas. So, we're suggesting that in terms of a service level, it's valid to sustain what you currently have for 2 arena sheets. So you're kind of at a point where your 2 arenas aren't necessarily right at capacity, but if you only offered 1 arena, if you decrease the level of service, you would be over capacity with 1 arena. And obviously you can't provide 1.5 arenas or 1.75 arenas. That's not how it works. So the logical solution here is provide 2 arenas moving forward. And again, we reflect back to that prioritization rank list. Arenas were one of the top amenities at that. So how do we do that? We're suggesting is a move forward approach to undertake an arena strategy to explore the best options and associated costs. And really the key catch line here is ideally working towards a twin arena facility in the long term. There's a number of operational and programmatic synergies that come by having 2 arenas, but that may be something that it's a bit of a Lego exercise, frankly, and you need to undertake some technical planning with architects and engineers to figure out sort of the potential options for that, costs, how that may all need to sort of come together. Again, it's sort of that Lego exercise. So that's a suggested next step for arenas. Again, sustain current service levels, but invest in exploring kind of how to best do that, and ideally in a twin arena configuration. The second one here is to implement a more robust playground renewal program, and some key goals or principles that we've put under that is really aimed at diversifying playground furniture to create more dynamic play experiences. And this is something that through renewal could occur over time, as you need to renew and replace playground equipment to do that, and to make sure you have a little bit more kind of breadth in terms of the play experiences you provide. Your level of play provision is quite strong, but a lot of your playgrounds are of a similar age and characteristic, and they appeal to kind of the same age and same types of experiences. So we really think that kind of moving forward, you need to kind of broaden that a little bit and integrate more kind of natural and dynamic and adventure type play. And certainly, we can go on and on as planners in this about the advantages of doing that, but we think that that's really quite key moving forward. And then the third one here is to formalize a specific renewal for minor capital works. So, across particularly your outdoor inventory, your sport courts and sport fields and diamonds and other park amenities, there's a whole host of kind of life cycle and small kind of easy win enhancement projects that make some sense to do over time. And what we're planning to do, if you're okay with this approach, is to work with city staff to actually come up with a detailed plan around that. So a bit of a timeline for, you know, when we're going to do this fencing project at this diamond and, you know, and this washroom replacement at this park, and really kind of schedule that out so that it's a little bit more structured and robust. So the next bucket here is to increase and enhance investment. So this is where, again, we'd be making you know, an incremental investment or increasing service levels would be the other way to refer to this. And obviously there's a little bit of overlap or crossover between these different buckets, but the first one we're suggesting here is to focus parks and trail investment on areas identified as gaps. And for those that have read the research report, we have a fairly robust section on some of the park analysis and analytics that we've done around that. And we've also met with city planning and some of your administration to talk this through and make sure that we're on the right track. And there's kind of 3 areas that we would suggest are kind of would maybe need a little bit more investment, and some of these are based on growth and some of these are based on gaps, or a combination of the two. So Forest Crown parks and playgrounds, the downtown area parks and playgrounds, and then the ski hill areas parks and playgrounds. So we've identified these as 3 areas, and the master plan and provide some guidance on kind of how to do that in a little bit more detail. But these are essentially 3 areas that kind of triggered through our analysis as requiring some more investment. The second one here is to revision Commuco Gardens as a destination community space. And we know that some of that work's already been initiated through the phase 1 planning out of the grant that you've received. And we would look to provide some principles around that in the master plan, really focused on kind of balancing some key considerations there. Heritage certainly being one. That's a big component of that site historically. The botanic appeal, food education, and event hosting. So again, we would look to kind of build out this more in the master plan, but we do think that space, it kind of checks all the boxes in terms of being revisioned as a destination community space for the future, as it has been in the past as well. And we're also suggesting to create an advisory committee and undertake a community-focused engagement and design process. So we can start with some principles in the master plan, but really it's going to need more of a specific deep dive through engagement and specific site design. And then the last one on this slide here is just to enhance trail amenities at key locations using a recommended classification system as a guideline. And we'll provide that for you. So I'll talk in a few slides about what a classification system could look like. But we really think that generally around both your trail and your park system, there's a need for a little bit more kind of structure around those spaces. Really for a couple different reasons. One, it supports good planning moving forward. So when we think of those minor capital works or smaller improvement projects, you know, that would help inform that. And also it helps provide some clarity around service levels as well. So understanding, okay, like what type of park or what type of trail has what type of amenity or doesn't, and helps manage some expectations and provides a bit of a maintenance management plan for those different kind of hierarchies of trails and parks. A few more under this bucket. So the increase, enhance investment. So this is just a couple, again, kind of continuing from the last slide here. There's a few other different ones that we're recommending here initially. The top one here on this slide, undertake a feasibility study to explore costs and options for an indoor multi-sport facility or community gymnasium. In terms of the indoor spaces, we'd really see this type of space as your most significant gap. Gymnasium space is obviously limited for much of the day, as you know, school gymnasiums are the only kind of gymnasium type amenity that you have. So there isn't a lot of capacity within the system for daytime indoor activities, as well as even just in the evenings for kind of spontaneous, non-programmed uses. So not suggesting necessarily you go put shovels in the ground on this, but looking at kind of what some of those options could be. And then explore and identify opportunities to include a new library as part of a future facility development. So a library, again, scored fairly high on the prioritization list. Your library is quite small, and certainly something that we're suggesting be explored. And I think the reason we put these together on this slide here is that we think that you may want to look at some of these projects as part of kind of a multi-amenity development. So the arena, field house, gymnasium, library planning, we're probably gonna, unless you tell us otherwise, we're probably gonna suggest to do those explorations kind of in synergy with each other, or at least ensure that those studies are considering what those synergies might be. Because those are all spaces that in a lot of communities where we've worked across Canada, they tend to fit together quite well, and there may be some cost savings by doing more than one amenity project at the same time. So that's the direction that we'd like to test with you on. That is, again, kind of looking at that multi-purpose facility that could potentially address a couple or all of library, arena, and community gymnasium field house type facility. So I referred to the classification system a little bit earlier, and again, the master plan, we are hoping to be able to recommend a new parks and trails classification system. And this is just an example from another project that we've worked on a number of years ago. These can all kind of look and feel a little bit differently here, but just to give you a sense of what this can entail, it can provide some guidance around what type of amenities are compatible or incompatible, or a standard for a different type of park space. So the two kind of images left and center there sort of show that different types of parks in a community, what they provide or should provide. So you would use that to then kind of go through your park system and kind of align your parks accordingly based on kind of their characteristics and where they would fit. And then on the far right there is just reflecting what a community park would have typically. So your planners could use this when they're planning different types of parks. So typically within a classification system, there would be a hierarchy that would be, for example, like a destination park, which would be community-wide serving, major space. Community park would serve multiple neighborhoods, and then a neighborhood park would serve a particular neighborhood. And we'd have kind of a cut sheet that would show what's the purpose of that park, what's its function, what's its ideal size, where is it located in terms of active or vehicular transportation, what's its street frontage, access and connectivity, design characteristics, and then we'd kind of categorize your existing park inventory accordingly. So again, this is intended to be a planning tool as well as a service level tool that your staff can use moving forward. So then there's a handful of management strategies here, which is that third bucket. And just wanted to review a couple of those key ones that we would like to propose. The first one here is undertaking an urban tree inventory and management plan. There isn't this point of reference in the community. You have a very extensive inventory of trees, obviously, as most communities do, and you in particular. And we just think that it's a really good idea to inventory and come up with a management plan to sustain those assets and have a bit of a game plan around that. The second bullet here is to ensure new and renewed partnership agreements have increased clarity, and in particular, a definition on the difference between capital maintenance versus operational maintenance. And this isn't intended to pick on anybody here, but I'd say we, in our review of a lot of those older agreements, that was maybe not as clear as it could be. And your staff have already moved forward with this one. So the Kimberley Gymnastics Club, I think, is a really good example of a newer agreement that does have a really clear definition. So essentially, we're just saying to kind of carry forward with some of the advancements they've already made in some of these agreements, and just to make sure that as these agreements are renewed, they have a lot more clarity, which really benefits both the city and these groups as well. And then the last one on the slide here, just increasing staff resources and support for community organizations that deliver parks, rec, and culture programming. So your model is very heavily reliant on volunteers and community organizations. So if a lot of those groups didn't have any capacity and all their volunteers went away and so forth, probably the keys, so to speak, to those programs would be dropped off at City Hall, and there'd be an expectation that the city would run those or some of those, and obviously the city can't afford to run all of those programs. So the most logical thing here to do is to ensure that there's maybe a little bit more investment and focus on building capacity in those organizations, and that's ensuring that they have the expertise, supporting them with volunteer recruitment and retention, things like that. And again, your staff's already doing a pretty good job at this, but you have a pretty limited staff group there with the city, and they can only do so much with the resources they have. So we really think that this is key to make sure that that system, if you will, is sustained into the future. So I know that's a lot to digest there, and a lot of hearing me speak. So I'm going to just open up for any questions, and yeah, we'll have some conversation, and we'll take some notes here on things you have to say, and certainly don't feel shy if there's anything you don't agree with, because we want to hear that right now.
Council Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I like this idea of, three things done at once, 3 places done at once. That's a great idea. I really like that idea. My only concern is when you talk about a new library, making it bigger, where are you gonna find a place to put it? Like in Kimberley, has anyone thought about where it's gonna go? When we start thinking about, making a larger library, would it be the same location or would it be a new location? That's just one of the concerns that I have. I do like the community gymnasium facility and definitely arena and indoor multi-sport field house. I think that's great. I think we can work with that, but the only one I'm concerned about is that library. Where are you going to find a suitable location for it?
Nicole,
Yeah.
did you want to speak to that?
Sure. I think Councillor Roy, we'll see that in some future studies that we're working on right now. So we're working on what we're calling an ICE strategy, which I think is going to encompass a option or a selection for multiplex, multi-purpose, where we'll see things like library, and then it'll actually take a deep dive into what properties are available and not available within the community space and make recommendations based on those type of things.
Thank you for that.
Were you going to add something, Steve?
Yes, sorry, Nicole did a great job answering that. And I was just gonna say that that one of the reasons that we are suggesting that it makes some sense to study a few of those different projects, either with each other directly, or at least considering the study or some sort of phase study approach, there is, as Nicole alluded to, like there's a need to look at what land you have available, recognizing that your land is limited, and what the footprint, like kind of test fitting these different options and configurations onto sites, and maybe looking at a future vision for your existing recreation campus. I know not everybody thinks of it that way, but if we think of like the pool and the arena and the courts, and like there is a pretty kind of linear chunk of land there, but there's a need to sort of test fit what could fit on there and how that could kind of those Lego pieces could come together.
Anything else? Councillor Cairns?
Thank you. Thanks for the great presentation. There's a lot there. So thank you. Really, really excellent to have this this out in front of us, and it's a lot to think about, and it's a really interesting conversation given the times that we're in and the kinds of decisions that we're needing to make kind of in this time of an affordability crisis and austerity, and at the same time so we're challenged to do so much more with less, so we really need to think about things differently, and the whole concept of flexible space and multi-use, and also how much our community is changing with a lot of young families moving into town. Seniors' needs are changing really rapidly, as well as the whole environment is changing. Lots of residents who are working from home who need these kinds of facilities as well. I think about this, and I'm looking at it. I think about the need for learning spaces, sharing knowledge, new technology, food growing, kind of repair fairs, resiliency spaces for people to go in extreme weather. So it moves me into this space of kind of looking more at the increase, enhance, and really building on our strengths, the attractions that have brought people to live here, and make it a good place to live, and those things that also attract people here. So, on the side of playgrounds, trails, Kaminko Gardens, I really think that it's really worthwhile investing in those. And the library is a great conversation. I also think it's really worthwhile over time to think about, we think about, okay, there's the benefits to be gained and efficiencies of co-locating these things, but then we also have a community that's really spread out. And people appreciate being able to walk to these places and having access to different facilities within their neighborhoods. So those two things are always kind of balancing out in my mind of, maybe it's better to have some of these things spread out a little bit, a bit more, but it's going to be, how do we find those synergies? And so the library, absolutely a key need, needs a much larger space, probably more than double what it has right now. And it's key that some things continue to be located in the Platzl that people use on a, everyday basis, or we're not going to have a Platzl because there's not going to be the foot traffic in it that's needed to keep it alive. So that's a really important piece as well. Really like the concept of the urban tree management plan. I've spent quite a bit of time in Kelowna, and their trees are a key feature. And I've asked, what about the cost of maintaining trees? And their view is that the investment is worth every penny because of the wind dampening, the cooling, air quality, flood control, mental health aspects, healthy community. I've seen numbers in terms of having a really healthy community, that you'd be able to see 3 trees from your home, and you'd be able to have a nice big tree within 30 meters, and you have access to a number of trees, a small, say, urban forest or park within 300 meters. So that's kind of a guideline that's out there that I've been seeing quite a bit. So yeah, just a few thoughts that I wanted to share, and thanks so much for the presentation.
Councillor McGuire?
Yeah, it similarly resonated with a lot of this, and a lot of it's already been spoken to. But yeah, just the last point around increasing staff resources to support community organizations and that risk of losing some services as volunteer, as we're at risk of losing volunteerism as well. I just appreciated that note, and it's something to think about. And really, there's a lot to think about here, and a lot of really good strategies. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Councillor Dennebeck?
Yeah, if I can say, awesome report. Still a lot to digest, but I think the really big thing for me that I see in this is this 3 strategy categories: invest to sustain. That's a huge target, and I think it's awesome that it's first out, looking at what we have and what we can spend and how we can leverage that money to make it go as far as we possibly can. To have a multi-use place here, I think would be a phenomenal asset for the community as we press being a resort town. And to have the facility that has everything in it. Growing up in the West Kootenays, I got to use the Comico Arena and Trail quite a bit, and it had racquetball, basketball, gym, library, and I'm sure, a whole bunch of awesome facilities all in one, and you meet all kinds of people there. It was great, and a great place to bring community together too, for concerts and stuff like that. And yeah, I could go on, but I think that a multiplex is essentially what we need to do, and I feel like we do have the land for it. We just may have to swap a few things around. My mind, I see a multiplex in Marysville where one existing arena is already, and then just a big, huge complex down there, which is easy to find for everybody, and I appreciate you guys coming in front of us and sort of letting us scrutinize this. I appreciate the work and effort that you guys put into this, so thanks for that.
Mr. Mayor, any comments?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation. I've just got a couple that I'll mention. Clearly, we are at the front end, kind of going through the highest level, and I think we're all, as has already been articulated, looking forward to kind of drilling down on some of the next steps. I just would like to make a couple of comments. So, with respect to the ice surfaces, you know, I think I agree in the report, it says that it would be very difficult to have a single sheet of ice. Actually, it said a single arena. And I think what we need to do is look at this in terms of sheets of ice for use as opposed to arena, which is a building. It gives a little more flexibility on how you might be able to separate the two. So for example, right now what we have is the arena that houses our junior hockey team, where we need lots of seats and spectators. You know, right now we seat about 1,500 people. That adds an awful lot of cost for a particular sheet of ice. But then we have something else that doesn't require all the spectators, that's a little more functional. So I guess all I'm suggesting is that we look at what our requirement is for ice surfaces. And with respect, I think, you know, I mean, the multiplexes have been under consideration and being built in lots of communities for a long time. One of the considerations I think that we have here is where the aquatic center is located. You know, typically these multiplexes, and aquatic center is central to that, along with, you know, all of these other facilities. And given that we've got an aquatic center that's only 15 years old, chances are pretty good it's not going to go too far. So how that might fit into that whole conversation about how we do that, particularly as it pertains to the land that we have available from the aquatic center all the way over to McDougall Avenue, that encompasses Rotary Park. I think, you know, we do have an awful lot of land there. I think we're going to have to be really creative about how that might sort itself out. The playground renewal experiences, yeah, we got a lot of old equipment, although still functional. And I think we can only look to the Swanette Park that just went in to take a look at what some of the new experiences are that we can put into the parks, things like the zip line and all of the other amenities that have been built into that park. The renewal schedule, this is one that's a little bit frustrating, because this really falls under the category of asset management. I mean, our parks and the renewal of these parks should be part of our overall asset management plan, and are probably, you know, parks and facilities are one of those areas that has really taken a back seat to, you know, pipes in the ground, and is going to take a little bit of work to catch up, just getting into understanding what they are as an asset and how we manage those going forward. With respect to, I mean, cost is always a consideration, because the only way we get money is from taxpayers, whether that's directly or indirectly through grants. And I think that we have an opportunity here over the next few years, as we're looking at these facilities, to partner both with the regional district, and you've identified in your report other communities that in fact have partnered with their surrounding regional district on recreation facilities. But we also have an opportunity with Purcell Collegiate. The Collegiate is expected to break ground in another 24 months or so, and an elite sports school is being planned as part of those amenities. And as they build their campus out, I think there's going to be an opportunity for us to look at how we might be able to partner, save some money, and maybe move forward with some of these amenities where otherwise we might not have been able to. Just want to touch on the agreements with the various facilities. The majority, I don't know, 3/4 of them are expired. Actually been expired for a while now, which means we definitely have an opportunity. A recent experience with the operating versus the capital definitions in those agreements happened with the conference center. The operating agreement we have with Resorts in the Canadian Rockies was not all that specific. And I know between RCR and the city, we have bickered over the first 5 years of that agreement on what's operating versus what is capital. I know a lot of work. Jim has put a lot of work into kind of, I'll call it modernizing it, even though it was only in place for one term. But I think there's an opportunity to do that with all of the agreements, given that they're expired. One other comment with respect to resident comments, as I was going through the list, and I think it was in the other document. You had made reference to those that have lived here for 1 to 5 years. This is their view versus those that have lived here for 10 or more years. This is the view. And we have a really interesting dynamic with the new population coming to Kimberley, particularly in the older, let's call it the 50 plus group. Some are seniors, some are not. In that the majority of these folks were actually visitors. Their genesis to Kimberley was visitors at some point in time. And so their experience in coming to town and the view that they have on what they have here is rooted in the visitor experience that they had when they came here, which can, and as we saw in that survey, is quite different from those that have lived here for a generation or 2 or 3. I think we have up to as many as 4 generations of the mining community that are living in Kimberley. So I think there's some insight that we may be able to gain by having a look at that as well. And I guess my last comment is really just going to surround differentiating between the aspirational and the practical. And I think as we start and are at the highest level, we want to talk about what the aspirational things are that we have for the community. But I think we need to be very practical as we drill down and come to something, particularly over the next 5 to 10 year period, that we can actually sink our teeth into and get done within what we can afford to do. That pretty much is it for now. Thank you.
Through the
Thank
chair,
you.
if I could just respond to a couple of the mayor's comments there.
Yes, oh, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, lots of great comments there. Just 3 things I just wanted to kind of note to provide some clarity on. First, in terms of arenas, I think we're on the same page, Your Worship. We are talking about ice sheets. So we say sustaining 2 arenas, it's really 2 ice sheets. But that feasibility study exercise, I think, is going to be required to really drill down on the characteristics of those facilities in terms of seating capacity and support amenities for your tenants and regular users, and what the first sheet capacity is versus the second. Like all those questions, I think needed a real deeper technical dive. So that's one thing. The second thing I just wanted to note, and I think it was a really good point that you reiterated there or alluded to, is that like the master plan is going to need to provide some implementation direction on what's short, medium, and long term. So some of these things that we're suggesting here may not be viable within the shorter medium term, and they may need to get kind of punted into the longer term. And that's kind of a next step here for us, is to start to put those into some of those buckets and sequential buckets. And then the third thing I just wanted to acknowledge that, we certainly realize that a number of your operating or partnership agreements are expired as well, and that's really kind of the heart of that recommendation. We think there's a terrific opportunity to renew some of those right now. So all really good points, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing those and provide a little clarity, particularly around the arena as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Just one last comment on the arena thing. It was interesting to note how certainly post-COVID, the Marysville Arena is actually, there's very small usage actually from this community. We're getting the usage from Cranbrook has increased, not just with minor hockey, but we've always had a lot of usage for the beer league guys, coming in. I think rather than look at that as a restriction, I think there's an opportunity in there, especially if we want to maximize the utilization of 2 ice surfaces. Thank you.
I'll just chime in here. We sort of slid by the current state of affairs with the one comment about it, but that is in fact where we're living, where we're looking at each one of our assets as either as being less than stellar at this state, and some of them are in pretty rough shape. I think we need to be realistic about the fact that we're going to have a lot of decision making about whether we're going to invest to sustain or put some enhancement money into some of these projects. If you're talking large projects like that, you're talking years down the road for some of them to be developed and to actually come into fruition. And as has been our example with the wastewater treatment plant, that's been a 7-year adventure to get to this place. And I think we really need to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of it's not going to happen really fast, no matter how much we wish and dream. But we're going to spend a lot of time in this area about how can we sustain something through this until we can make it better. And I just want to not let that go unsaid, because that's a real practical part about the fact that we have limited income as a municipality based purely on our tax base, and when only approximately 85 to 87% of our tax base is based on a residence, is not going to grow fast anytime soon. So we have to be very cognizant about how we move into these great ideas. However, that does not take away my point of view of the fact that these are absolutely amazing ideas and thoughts put on the table that for us to work with. And I really appreciate the manner in which you've presented it all. Thank you. Anything further, Council?
Yep.
Anything
One
else
more
from us?
comment, if I may.
Yes.
You mentioned in the presentation a couple of times tourism. It really wasn't explicitly mentioned at all in the report. It was more inferred, I guess. And I can't emphasize enough the impact, particularly on many of these amenities that our tourism community has. Our last kind of official count in 2022 is that we had about 250,000 unique visitors to the city. Pardon me. And many of these amenities, in particular trails, and some of the more broad outdoor amenities, are really heavily used by the folks that come to Kimberley. And I think as we look at our facilities, there are some that are more oriented toward the community, but there are some that weigh heavily from the tourist component as well. And given that it's really our only economic driver, our single economic driver that we have in town right now, I think we need to apply a tourism lens to several of these categories as well. A good example is Kameko Gardens. You mentioned the grant that we got. That grant, in fact, came from a grant for tourism dependent communities, and the whole essence of that grant was that renewal was going to be used to actually drive increased tourism coming to town. So while I understand that from a community point of view, it's a really important asset as well, this is one of those dual things where we need to kind of tiptoe through the minefield on exactly how we end up at a final result. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry if I could just respond to that through the chair to the mayor. I agree, and so we've included in the criteria economic benefits, which is essentially measuring amenities that drive non-local visitation to some degree would score higher under that. So even though residents through the survey told us that wasn't important, we've still included that criteria. So that is something that is factoring into the ranking initially. So I just wanted to acknowledge that is something that is factored into the decision-making process, because we certainly understand that is an important consideration in Kimberley's context.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Further, Council? Councillor Dennebeck?
Have we reached out to the international school and see if they're building this awesome superplex of a school, wouldn't it be in their best interest and our best interest to reduce impact and to build one big facility that everybody could share, rather than I'll use the word segregation because I don't know what the proper one is right now. And again, to help bring everything together and bring costs down for everybody. Just my 2 bits.
Mr. Mayor?
The answer is yes to that. In fact, they have reached out to us in anticipation of a mutually beneficial partnership.
So that sounds like there'll be planning going forward.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Don.
All right, Steve, it sounds like we're kind of at the end of our questions, and I really appreciate you spending your time with us, and I think we're going to hear more from you.
Yeah, you bet. Look forward to being there in person next time to share the master plan with you. So thanks for your time this evening and really great feedback and comments here. So yeah, look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next point of business this evening is going to be presented by our CAO/finance manager. It's kind of, we're not sure which to call you anymore, Jim. I guess you're the big guy now. So we're going to be looking at the 5-year financial plan deliberations, and there'll be a number of motions to be completed in moving forward into finalizing our annual budget, our 5-year plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll just give Maurice a few minutes to get it up on the screen here. I'll get organized myself.
We're going to have a lot of motions to do here, Jim. How about if we start with that we're going to receive your plan, and we are looking for council will receive the financial officer's presentation of March the 4th, and we're looking for operating capital budget changes for information. A mover, Councillor McGuire, and a seconder, Councillor Royer. All in favor? And carried.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and we'll work our way through the rest of the resolutions there in the body of the report. So as they come up, we'll put those forward to council for consideration. Am I going to be using the clicker here, Maurice? Okay. Yeah, a little nostalgia here to start off with. The operations department is a bad influence that way. They're trying to keep Happy alive. So meeting agenda here tonight, I'll first give a bit of a budget recap. This has been a bit of a protracted process. It's been going on for a while, so I'll let council know where we've been. Then we'll talk about just the financial plan foundation, proposed general operating budget adjustments, talk about the aquatic center parcel tax, water and sewer operating budget adjustments, and then some adjustments to the capital and non-capital plan, and then talk about where we're going next. As far as a budget recap, on November 20th, there was a presentation where council provided a bunch of recommendations with regards to the setting of utility rates for water, sewer, and garbage. I had a note under the bulk water adjustment, and thanks to a couple of members of council for catching that. It does indicate that the bulk water rate was increased by 10%. Effective January 1st, 2024, it was in fact increased by 15%. So rather than going from $2.50 to $2.75, it went from $2.50 to $2.88 per thousand gallons of water. So yeah, the bylaws referred to here, they've been before council and they were adopted in December. So those rates are now in place. Likewise with recycling, organics collection fees, there's also a resolution related to the property tax distribution, providing direction that the same percentage increase be applied across all property classifications. And the last one there was that the flat tax levy be left the same for 2024 for both improved and unimproved residential properties. And then more recently, on February 5th, council approved inclusion of the capital and non-capital projects as presented at that meeting, inclusion in the 5-year financial plan. So that was the most recent budget meeting to date. With regards to the foundation, in council, I go through this bit of a summary every year, but year 2 of the current 5-year financial plan, which is the 2023 to 2027 financial plan bylaw, we're operating under the authority of year 2 of that plan until we adopt a new bylaw. So year 2 of the current 5-year financial plan essentially operates as the base budget to which council makes adjustments based on a variety of factors. So the base budget for 2024, that should say approved for in year 2 of the financial plan bylaw, includes a 4.38% increase in 2024. So also included for 2024 is a budget of $100,000 for anticipated new tax on non-market assessment change. So as a side note, I've got a slide a little later on in the presentation that indicates that the new tax on non-market assessment change was in fact higher than that. So to the base budget again, modifications are made based on a variety of factors. Those could be confirmation of previously estimated expenditure adjustments, higher than anticipated inflationary factors, council approved amendments to fees and charges, carry forwards from previous years. So on the next couple of slides here, I've got the proposed amendments to the base operating budget for 2024. Is there a trick to this, Vicky? There we go. So the figures that are bolded here, that indicates that there's a slide in behind that I'll flip to that's got additional information. So I'm not going to go through each one of these in detail. I'll flip back to the slide, and I think it's the ones that require additional explanation are the ones that I have additional slides on. We will speak to the first line item there. It's a reduction to the budget of just about $89,000, and that's just as a matter of course. Every year when we're going through the budget, we'll go through and have a look at every line item in the budget and adjust some of them based on historical spending. So that $89,000 adjustment, it's comprised of adjustments to, I think, about 67 line items. Some adjustments as small as a couple $1,000s and some up as large as $10,000 or $15,000, but really just a bunch of smaller amounts that combine to a reduction to the budget. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, you can't really see it on the overhead here, but all of those adjustments add up to $356,950 in additional operating expenditures. The biggest one of those is the RCMP contract retro pay of $218,000. And again, I'll speak to these in later slides here. So these are all adjustments to operating expenditures. And the next table here is adjustments to revenues. So there's just about $80,000 of increased revenues, which offsets the previous slide. So it ends up being an adjustment of $277,377 in increased net expenditures to the operating budget, the general operating budget. And again, there's slides in behind here for most of these as well. So I'll just start flipping through those. So the Human Resources Information System, last year council approved an annual expenditure of $39,258 to fund annual license fees for HR information system. And the intention of it was to enhance services and improve efficiencies. That system did not get implemented in 2023. And during deliberation of this year's 5-year financial plan, the manager of HR has requested that budget allocation be reallocated to the hiring of an occupational health and safety advisor in 2024. As indicated on the slide here, rather than hiring that position in 2024, as you'll see it on a later slide here, it's being suggested by administration that we provide some reserve funding, a non-capital project to get the occupational health and safety OH&S plan put into place over 2024 and 2025, so that an administrator could pick that up and implement it in 2025. So that the notion of hiring a new employee will be revisited in 2025 during deliberation of next year's 5-year financial plan. And I talk a bit more about this, the whole OH&S issue later on in the presentation as well. The next one is the elimination of the College of the Rockies Fire Training Program. So this was a partnership that was been in place since 2010. And in, I believe it was August of 2023, council passed a resolution that to notify College of the Rockies that the 2023 to 2024 program intake would be the last year of the city's partnership with the program. So the budget that we included in 2024, before that resolution was made in relation to the program, was there's $50,000 of revenue budgeted, which were the fees paid by College of the Rockies to the city. There was $15,000 in wages budgeted to the program, which was the firefighters that provided the instruction. There were miscellaneous fees associated of $3,571. And there was also a budgeted transfer to Fire Training Center Reserve of $23,507. And then there was $7,800 left that was basically went into general revenue. So through the elimination of the program, the revenue and all of the expenditure items were eliminated with the exception of the $15,000 in wages. Those will still be incurred, just allocated to elsewhere within the fire department. So really the only, it says $22,922 at the top of the slide. That's the net of the elimination of the revenues and expenditures, but really we're losing that allocation to the reserve as well. So the balance of that Fire Training Center Reserve at the end of the year is estimated to be about $300,000. So despite the fact that the fire training program ceases to exist, we're not partnering with the college on that anymore. The training center is still there. It's still utilized by the department. And I believe there still are plans in the future to either enhance that, enhance the training center, or perhaps look at doing something different. So that $300,000 will be there to help support that project when we get there. So the RCMP contract retro pay, council's been through this a couple of times. In 2021, the RCMP ratified their first ever collective agreement. And in 2023, as a result of that, the city received an invoice for $218,000 to bill for the retroactive pay associated with the 6 years that the RCMP members were without a wage agreement. In anticipation of the invoice for the retro pay, we had been notified of this years in advance by the RCMP. The city contributed to a reserve. So these monies are sitting in a reserve fund, so they're not going to impact property taxes, the payment of this. There was some dispute in 2023 on whether or not the municipality should be paying the full amount of this bill. So there was a bit of back and forth with the feds on this, but at the end of the day, they didn't back down. They offered to extend the payment of it. So this will be cleared in 2024. The amount will come out of the reserves and the invoice will clear, so that we won't be seeing this again next year's budget. Retirement sick leave payouts, council's seen this every year for the last few years. Under a previous collective agreement, union employees used to accrue sick leave, and the value of that sick leave, or any balance remaining when they left the employment of the city through retirement or otherwise, would be paid out. So over the years, that benefit was negotiated out subsequently, so it's no longer a benefit to new employees. And as employees have retired, the amount that was to be paid out has kind of been knocked down, and this $42,766 is what's left of that accrued sick pay. we anticipate that the employees that relates to are going to retire this year. So we've got that budgeted to be paid out. And it'll be paid out of current year's, prior year's surplus, so it won't impact the property taxes, the property tax rates this year. GIS software, licensing software and support, so $27,000 here. In 2023, the operations department replaced the city's previous GIS software. Council approved the submission of an application for $48,000 to undertake that work. It was a $60,000 project. At the same time, council also passed a resolution directing staff to include an amount sufficient to fund the annual subscription fees associated with the system in the budget. So that's what this is doing. 22,000 of the 27 is the annual subscription fee for this Esri GIS system, and $5,000 is for contract support if staff need it to help with system upgrades and just ongoing maintenance of the GIS system. Chamber of Commerce fee for service. So there was a period of time, 3-year period from 2020 to 2022, where there was no fee for service agreement in place between the city and the chamber. In 2023, subsequent to the financial plan being adopted, there was a new agreement negotiated and signed into between the city and the chamber. It was for 1 year. That agreement expires on May 15th, 2024, and there were a number of deliverables associated with that I've noted below. So a business survey, new business information packages, events, and the investment attraction program. So I've noted on there that the first two haven't been received yet. I did meet with the president of the chamber a few weeks ago, and they are working on those. Actually received an email this morning asking for a meeting just to get some clarification on some of that. So those deliverables, they're working to satisfy those before the end of the term. So what I've done in anticipation that a new agreement will be entered into upon the expiry of this one, I've again budgeted the $25,500 in 2024 and each year going forward. And we'll do that unless I receive direction to do something different from council, or we end up doing something different with the chamber. So the next one is council travel and remuneration. So through COVID, there wasn't a lot of travel going on with council or really any other department in the city. So budgets were reduced. So this is really just getting the budgets back up to where they were, allowing for some miscellaneous travel for council and also members of council to attend conferences like UBCM, the AKBLG, and the FCM. So the 21 to 23 is an annual budget that will be increased by inflation each year to allow the attendance at these conferences. Transit services, and I think I saw Troy was on the call here. So Troy, if you want to jump in here at some point, just let us know. But this $15,579 is to get to the budget that was provided by BC Transit for the provision of the service in Kimberley. So in partnership with BC Transit, there's 4 different routes that are offered using fully accessible buses available to everyone in Kimberley. So if you look at the table in the middle of the slide there, you can see that the transit revenue that we've got budgeted as provided by BC Transit, $109,000. Ticket sales of $33,000 for a total revenue of $142,000, and the expenses associated with the service are $350,719. So the current property tax subsidy budgeted for transit service for the city is $208,607. I've made a note at the end there that in September, council approved a couple of different expansions to the transit service. Those haven't, or maybe they have recently, but those required provincial approval before we included them in the budget. So the information that was provided to council back in September indicated that the expansions that were approved at that meeting would increase the tax subsidy by about $118,000. So if those expansions are approved by the province, they could be implemented in town here as early as the fourth quarter of this year. The increase to the subsidy would require a property tax increase of just about 1% to fund. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move ahead here. I don't see Troy jumping in, so I'll move on here. So Indigenous relations, we've got a budget of $10,000 here, and that's the net of a $20,000 expenditure budget and a $10,000 grant that we're anticipating to receive. So just a bit of background, at a community-to-community meeting with ACOM held on November 8th, the respective councils committed to meeting 4 times in 2024 with the goal of building the relationship between the communities and updating the current memorandum of understanding into a more meaningful document. So the structure of the meetings is yet to be determined, but this is just a budget. This is the first time we've done this, so we don't have a real good feel for what the cost of it is. One of the meetings is likely going to be facilitated, so there will be a cost associated with that. So this is really just an upset price. We anticipate that the $10,000 grant that we're applying for through UBCM's community-to-community program will be successful. So it could be that the expenditures will only be $10,000 and it will be fully covered by the grant, but we've got the additional 10 in there just to cover off in case. The WCB premiums, we're increasing those by $17,000 this year, just based on our experience rating going up. When establishing the premium rate for a particular organization, WorkSafe BC compares that organization's claims and payroll history with other organizations in the same group to see if they qualify for a discount rating or surcharge. In our case, the base rate of 3.83% or $3.83 for every $100 of accessible payroll, they've added a surcharge of 27.9% onto that based on our claims history. So that extra 28% is costing us about $73,000. And total premiums this year based on estimated 2024 accessible payroll are going to be about $334,000. And I speak to this a little bit more when we get back to the occupational health and safety piece as well. So increase to the library operating grant, this is a relatively small amount. In prior years, 2022 and 23, the requested grant from the library was 5% and 6.5% respectively. The Kimberley Public Library is a municipal library, and under the Library Act, each year they're obligated to present council with the budget for the facility, and council is obligated to in turn approve the budget either as presented or with changes. When the budget was presented for 2023, it actually was presented after the budget had been adopted. So we ended up having to pay for the increase. We historically budget for 1.5% increase to coincide with what the other community groups get for standing grants under the community grants policy. With the 6.5% being approved in 2023, we were short on that, on the budget. So this year, it's really just a bit of catch up. The recent budget presentation on February 26th by the library board, they requested a 3% increase, which was approved by council. The increase works out to more than that, just to plain catch up. But that brings it up to $192,200 with that increase, which is what the approved budget was for the library this year. So short-term rental licensing, for a couple of years now, in 2022, the city implemented software to assist staff with the tracking and enforcement of short-term rental licenses. At that time, the associated annual fee for the licenses was $15,000. We really didn't have any history to base the license fee collection on. So in 2022, the budget was set at $30,000 and we fell a bit short of that at 26. So we left the budget at $30,000 for 2023 and actually ended up bringing in $49,250 of revenue. So this year, with a focus on enforcement, the corporate services and planning departments anticipate that compliance will continue to grow, and they've requested that the license fee revenue for this year be increased by 83%, by $25,000 to $55,000. And they've also proposed that they use a portion of that increased revenue to purchase another module of the existing software in 2024 to enhance the software's functionality, further assist with the informants to help with compliance. So the $15,000 is actually it's a reduction to the budget because the revenue increases by more than the expenditure. So the last one I've got here is building permit fees. So the last number of years, primarily as a result of strong residential construction activity, development revenue has exceeded budget expectations. Given the unpredictability of the construction market, development fee revenue is typically budgeted fairly conservatively to avoid swings from year to year. But indications are that construction activity is going to remain strong in 2024 and through the remainder of this 5-year planning period. And as a result, the manager of planning has recommended that the building permit fee budget increase from $200,000 to $300,000 for 2024. And as I'll discuss a little bit more later in the presentation here, it's recommended that $100,000 in revenue, increased revenue, be directed to the general capital reserve, just in an effort to help close the gap on the shortfall between recommended annual infrastructure investment and the amount we're currently able to invest, as discussed on February 5th during the capital and non-capital budget presentation. At that February 5th meeting, I did indicate to council that I would be bringing forward a more detailed analysis of reserves, just to provide council with more information. That will be coming. There was a lot of information in this meeting, as it was with the previous presentation in this. So I think it probably deserves a bit of a dedicated discussion on that. So at a future meeting, I'll bring back some more information to council on that reserve piece. But I will talk about it a bit more on the next slides here. So this table here, it pulls the numbers forward from the previous slide. So the table on the increases to expenditures and revenues, the net of the 277, 370 that we discussed before is noted up top there. The new property tax on non-market assessment change. So this results primarily from new construction. So new assessment that didn't exist last year. And as indicated before, we budgeted $100,000 for that, based on about $43.5 million of new residential construction primarily. We're anticipating that number to be about $191,301. So because we have a $100,000 budget, that $91,000 is that's the unanticipated revenue. So that's revenue that we had budgeted for. So taking that into account, it reduces the proposed increase for the budget, brings it down from that 277 to 186. And on this slide, I've taken into account, so the 186 is noted up at top here. Please stop me if you'd like some additional explanation on this. I'm just throwing a bunch of numbers here at you, I realize. But included in that 186, as I mentioned before, the RCMP retro pay is being funded from a reserve. So that can be pulled out of that number because it's got nothing to do with property tax revenue being collected in 2024. That money's already set aside. Likewise with the retirement sick leave payouts, as I mentioned before, that's being pulled from surplus. So that's got nothing to do with tax revenue. The $100,000 in new revenue, rather than that going to reducing the tax rate, I'm proposing that go into general reserves. Likewise, with the $91,000 new tax on non-market change, I'm recommending that amount go into non-capital or into general capital reserves as well. So the proposed increase to the general operating base budget for 2024 is that $115,949, which works out to just about a 1% increase over and above the 4.38 that we had at the beginning of the presentation. So adding that 4.38 and the 0.95, what I'm proposing is a 5.33% tax increase for 2024 on the average single family residential home, which in 2024 is assessed at $541,724. That's based on the completed assessment roll. We won't receive the revised assessment roll until April, so that number could change again slightly. That results in a increase to property taxes of $144.79. So total municipal taxes on that $541,000 house with that 5.33% increase would be about $2,566 for the variable portion of the taxes. And then there's the flat tax component as well, which we left at $306. So it'd be $2,872 is what we'd be looking at. And I'll flip through these last couple of slides here, and then if council wants to come back and ask questions on any of this stuff, I'll flip back. Just provided a few comparisons here, and this was just a Google search on the communities that did have information. They had either adopted the bylaws or they had put their preliminary budgets out or their draft budgets. So Cranbrook, they recently adopted their bylaw, so they're looking at an 8.32% increase in 2024. There's a variety of reasons for that. I just have to caution council that whenever we're looking at comparisons between different municipalities here, there's so many variables involved in this that it's really tough to draw any conclusions from just these numbers on the board here. But I just wanted to provide them as a bit of an example of what's going on in our area. So Creston's at 7.3%, Invermere 6.75. That was proposed and noted in the post that I found. Castlegar looks like they've got different rates for residential and commercial light industrial. So 6.43 and 6.7. 5.33 is what we've proposed here. Nelson, based on the draft, they're at 5.3 and Revelstoke at 5%. On the next slide here, I've just got some options. I presented this last year as well. Some options if council were interested in something other than that 5.33% increase. So options to reduce that would be to defer, eliminate one or more of the proposed changes to the budget as presented. You could reduce service levels. Hey, Nick, would you mind getting me a glass of water? Sorry, thanks. Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna wait for that water. And yeah. Sorry, just be a sec. Yeah, some of the bigger options are that $100,000 in building permit fee revenue and the new tax on non-market change. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so these are some of the options available to council, but I'll just flip back to the slide that showed the tax increase, and just really would like to get council's thoughts on that. I think it's fairly reasonable. given what's going on these days. The recommendation to include those two amounts, direct them to the general capital reserve as opposed to putting them through and reducing the tax increase, as we have done in previous years. We've taken that, particularly the increased new tax on non-market change, and use that to reduce tax revenue. That February 5th budget presentation that I put in front of council, the asset management investment plan indicates that we should be investing about $15.2 million in our infrastructure every year based on its current condition. And of course, that includes money from reserves, grants, borrowing. So you have to take that into consideration. But in 2024, we budgeted to contribute about $5.6 million to reserve. So there's that shortfall of about $9 million. And again, some of that money is going to come from grants for some reserves. But I think that the point of that brief analysis there, it's a fairly rudimentary calculation. But the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough money going into capital reserves to do everything that we need to do. And I don't know that we ever will, quite frankly. But any opportunity that we can get to put more money into those reserves, I think we need to take advantage of it. This is a fairly painless way to do it. We were fortunate enough to be able to bump that building permit fee revenue up. So that's $100,000 coming in that we can put into reserves. So with those two amounts, the 100,000 and the 91 for the new non-market change, that's $191,000 additional that'll be going into general capital reserves in 2024. That amount will be contributed every year. So over this 5-year plan, it's just about $1 million of additional funds that we'll be able to spend on infrastructure renewal. So I'll throw it out. Is there
Any comments, council? Are you feeling okay, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. So on the reserve side of things, the money that's being put into reserves, I think it's important to note that through the course of the presentation, many of the increases in expenditure are being offset by reserves that are already in place. I think one of the lessons we learned over the last 10 years is that strong reserves give you flexibility. And I would hate to see any compromise to building those reserves, especially given, as you've already indicated, Jim, that we are underfunded in the reserves in any event. The percentages, as you said, are less important than what the absolute numbers are. And we're talking about a $144 increase on that $500,000 home, adjusted upward or downward, depending on where the assessment lies. If you take a look at the level of services and things that we're providing in this budget, that $144 is pretty good money spent, in my opinion. It's a pretty modest increase at the end of the day. Thanks.
Councilor Royer?
Yeah, I have to agree with Don. I mean, the options to reduce, don't even touch it. Just leave it the way it is. That's my opinion. I'm stick to it.
Further council? Councilor McGuire?
Yeah, I'm just curious what CPI for BC was in 2023. So
December to December, I think it ended up being 3.4.
yeah, so I see that we're, as comparable communities, we're doing okay, but I mean, inflation narrowly, we're well above the inflation rate, which worries me a little bit. And this is maybe discussion for moving forward, consideration for moving forward. I think it's good to build up our reserves, and I support that. But we do have this looming wastewater treatment plant, which will be a significant tax increase as well. So I just think that moving forward, we really need to look closely at ways of reducing the increases to our operating budget. 2 questions just around the fire training center. I didn't totally understand a couple points there. Are we expanding services with that extra $15,000 of wages that aren't being used to train people? Is that correct? And is there revenue that's coming in for that in the future? I just thought that there was some sort of, when we approved the removal of the training center, that it was meant to give us an opportunity to expand services to something else. And is that going to be an ongoing expense? That extra $22,000 is kind of ongoing operationally from now on?
Yeah, so the $22,000 in addition to the former reserve contribution, so that's essentially lost revenue to the city. I pulled the staff report from August where council provided direction to notify College of the Rockies that we wouldn't be partnering with them anymore. And the justification, it really didn't, it did speak to the money to a certain extent. What the report indicated that the expenditures that were being budgeted to or charged to the fire training didn't really reflect the true cost of that program. It indicated that there was, let's see here, 264 hours of staff time that was dedicated to that program. So those were the hours that our full-time firefighters were spent training the students through that program. And while they were doing that, there was a requirement to backfill their time with the call ranks. So they were having to call ranks in to pay for them. So that cost wasn't being captured. Some of the justification provided in the staff report, it indicated that, I'll just read this bit of a blurb here to provide some context. The Kimberley Fire Services is a composite model of 4 full-time positions and 28 call ranks. Anytime a staff member was instructing a course for College of the Rocky, it affected the emergency response capabilities of the fire department. They rely on the ability of the call rank membership to backfill coverage during the contractual obligation with College of the Rockies. Oftentimes shifts were not backfilled. Further, when staff members were working on College of the Rockies obligation, it affected the department's inspection program, training program, and all administrative work as call ranks weren't available to fill portions of the position. So a lot of it had to do with just capacity issues. There was also a note on the future. There are ongoing discussions with the Regional District of East Kootenay to provide rural fire protection service outside of our municipal boundaries, which will be a further draw on the department's capacity. So I think there was some forethought being put into freeing up some capacity to take that on as well.
And where is that at? You know, is that still in discussion?
Yeah, it's still in discussion. I haven't actually been involved in any of those discussions. That was Scott that was kind of looking after that. But I did have contact with the RDEK chair, who indicated that was something that was on his radar to get that kind of moving in 2024. So I anticipate that we'll have something coming back to council on that soon to provide some details and let you know what that's all about.
And then just one minor question on the STR cost of $15K. Is that a one-time fee that we're talking about? And was the original $15K for the software a one-time fee, or is this like now we're paying $30K per year? Is that correct?
That's
like
correct.
Moving forward, we'll be paying $30,000 for software.
Yeah, but we've got $55,000 revenue coming in to more than offset that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Dunnebeck?
I just want to, I guess, express my disappointment with the College of the Rockies maybe not stepping up to the plate and helping us build a facility. To lose the ability to have young men and women come to town and have that facility there, although it does need updates. I feel like it's a big loss to the fire department as well, and possibly grooming people that go through the course here and then essentially end up moving here to work for a fire department. So to have it move all the way to Creston, just, it's disappointing that the college and the city couldn't come to some sort of agreement where maybe the college stepped up and provided more so that we weren't losing so much time with our paid staff. I guess that's all I have to say.
Councillor Karen?
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation, Jim. And I'm interested, we're looking to tighten our belts, just different areas. And out of interest, I looked at the bulk water rate, wanted to see how we compare with other cities, and recognizing, as you've already mentioned, the comparisons are of limited value because our situations are dramatically different. But just a quick Google search and noted, with Kimberley will be the rate that was looked at with 10%. Yeah, I realize it's gone a little bit higher than that, but we were at about 61% of what it costs the city to provide the water. The Invermere is charging bulk users $19.37 per 1,000 gallons. Dawson Creek is $23.35 per 1,000 gallons. Grand Prairie is $50 per 1,000 gallons. The city looked at this in 2017 and calculated that it cost the city $4.07 per 1,000 gallons to provide that service, and that the rate would need to be increased by 20% every year from then forward to get to cost recovery in 2026. But we haven't been hitting that 20% mark, and the cost of service will be higher now, and the need for water conservation and responsible stewardship is more pressing than ever. So I would really like to be able to revisit that. I don't think it's fair that taxpayers have been substantially subsidizing the bulk water through time. Actually, since, from it was about 14 years that the water rates did not change for the for bulk water users, but for residents it went up 41%, 42%. So I'm not sure exactly how to do this, but I realize the bylaw is already in effect. But I would like to table a motion that we look at increasing the bulk water rate an additional 5% over that 15, so we do hit that 20% mark this year, and make that effective on July 1st. So I'm not sure how to go about doing that at this point. Maybe it's a motion I need to bring forward at a future meeting, but I'd really like to see us meet that 20% mark so that we can start to get back on track to actually get up to what it costs to provide that service.
That would have to take place at a future meeting. And if I could just give you a little history on that, you noted that there was a large discrepancy, and that's not through the fault of the users. It was through the fault of the city, that there was no upgrade done regularly to make sure that those costs were covered. It was basically ignored. And when it was brought to people's attention, it was, almost like crazy business impossible to be able to bring them from there to there very quickly. So the intention was to try to get it up, as you noted, over a period of time. Now, that said, every year when it comes up, the debate goes on around council's table about, well, what do we do this year and what seems fair? If you were that business, how much could you absorb in your costs and still be able to handle it? And that's where the decision gets made each year. And we've been slowly eating away at it and trying to come up with it. It's always in the front of the discussion when it's brought forward. But for tonight's purposes, that would have to be an additional meeting sometime in the future.
I do think it's really important to make sure we hit that 20% mark, so I will bring that forward at a future meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd suggest maybe reaching out to corporate services and asking what best path forward is. If you're, if you're thinking of a July 1st date, that does give us some time to kind of work the logistics out. To bring that forward. The bylaw has been adopted, but the way it works right now is the users of that bulk water are billed on a quarterly basis. So I think if there were to be a change, if the change were to be set at the end of a or beginning of a calendar quarter, that, you know,
No.
that wouldn't mess things up from financial perspective. So yeah, I think Maurice could probably help you with a path forward on that.
One more comment, Councillor Dunnebeck, then we'll move into this motion.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment supporting Sue there. Yeah, it's time that the playing field is leveled so that it's equal, so that the citizens don't feel like they're taking the brunt of paying, and it should be shared. And like you say, we've set the bar at 20%, and I think that bar should be met. It's just good policy to maintain so that so we can maintain what we have here and move forward.
Point taken, Councillor Dunnebeck. Ready for the motion?
Yeah, I'll flip to the resolution slide here.
The council approved for inclusion in the 2024 to 2028 5-year financial plan bylaw the proposed adjustments to the 2024 general operating base budget as detailed and described on slides 11 through 28 of the Chief Financial Officer's March 4th, 2024 presentation to council. And further, that property tax collections in 2024 be increased by 5.33% from 2023 levels to fund the adjustments as approved, and that any further tax collection increases needed to fund additional operating expenditures subsequently approved by council, if any, be authorized by separate resolution. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Roy, seconder. Councillor Kerens. Discussion? All in favor? And carried.
Thank you, Council.
Carry on, Jim.
So the next section here is in relation to the Aquatic Center parcel tax. This is a preliminary calculation pending receipt of the revised assessment roll, which will provide us with the final parcel count for the calculation. Just a bit of history on this. The Aquatic Center parcel tax was set up when the facility was first built, and the purpose of the funds collected on the parcel tax, as noted in the parcel tax bylaw, are to fund construction and operation of the Aquatic Center. So the way it works now, previously there was a few different funding sources for the operating deficit and debt payments associated with the Aquatic Center. A portion of it was funded through property tax collections, a portion through the Aquatic Center parcel tax, and oddly enough, a portion of it from the Bootleg golf course revenues under that agreement when the city owned that property. In 2019, the funding model was changed so that 100% of the operating deficit, the associated debt payments, are funded through the parcel tax. So there's no property value tax that goes towards funding this. And because of that, the money that's collected through the parcel tax can only be used for the purpose for which it was put into place, which again is the construction and operation of the Aquatic Center. So if we're left with any money, we collect more money through parcel tax than we need to fund the operating deficit and debt payments, that's put into a reserve, and it's pulled out of the reserve to reduce the parcel tax amount in later years. So hopefully I can explain that through this table here. So the operating deficit for 2024 for the pool is the operating revenue, it's 354,151 is what we're anticipating. The expenditures are $1.254 million. And the final payment of the debt associated with construction of the Aquatic Center is $191,000. So the Aquatic Center deficit before adjustments was just over $1 million, $1,091,000. And the balance that was in the parcel tax reserve that I referred to on the previous slide was $54,000. So we're going to use that to reduce the amount of the deficit. The preliminary parcel tax count is 4,665. So that's every parcel of property within the municipality regardless of class. So whether it's commercial, residential, industrial, it's included in that number. So we're looking at $222.39 is the preliminary parcel tax calculation for 2024. I noted that the final debt payment is going to be made this year. So actually it'll be made in 2025. So once that the debt is gone, about $41 of the parcel tax that's collected is collected to fund that debt payment. So when that's gone, council will have the opportunity, if they so wish, to reduce the parcel tax levied by that $40 or $41 commencing in 2026. So I'm not looking for any direction from council on the parcel tax at this point in time. Once we get that revised assessment roll with the final numbers, I'll bring a report back to council asking them for approval of the parcel tax levy so that we can amend that bylaw and include that on the tax notices for 2024. So similar to the operating budget, there's also a base budget for the water and the sewer, a lot less adjustments. I'll just go through those quickly. So water user fees, in the second year of the current 5-year financial plan, it was budgeted for a 2% increase for water fees. Council provided direction, as noted at the beginning of the presentation, to increase those by 5%, which results in $123,000 in additional revenue. There is an elimination of private hydrant maintenance that used to bring in some revenue to the city, so we're losing that. There were, again, some adjustments to reflect historical actual spending. So again, combing through the accounts to see where we could make adjustments based on what we're actually spending in comparison to budget. And there's a small increase to the water education budget. That's for, I don't think we're calling it a Water Smart Ambassador anymore, but a student to help educate the community on water use. So the net reduction to the budget is $157,000. And as we talked about during earlier in the deliberation process when we were setting the water rates, the reason for the increase from the 2 to 5% was so that we could invest additional money into reserves. So that additional money through the budget reduction will get put into the water capital reserve for investment in water infrastructure renewal. And this just, again, kind of reiterates what I just spoke about. So unless there's any questions on that, the resolution is that council approve for inclusion in the 24 to 2028 5-year financial plan bylaw, the proposed adjustments to the 2024 water operating base budget is detailed on slide 36 of the CFO's March 4th, 2024 presentation. And further, that the adjustments as approved be offset by a corresponding adjustment to the water capital reserve contribution for 2024.
Have a motion, please? Councilor Roy, second. Councilor McGuire, all in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you, council. And similar for the water fund, or the sewer fund, sorry. So the sewer increase that was budgeted in year 2 of the current 5-year financial plan was 5%. So we've maintained that. The adjustment of $45,000 is primarily the result of new connections. That's again a bit of an adjustment to reflect historical revenue. And there's a smaller adjustment below that, again, to reflect historical actuals. There was a budget request put in to increase expenditures for goods and services for the treatment plant related to amended operating permit conditions, and a small adjustment to permits and licenses as well. So those adjustments result in a $38,000 reduction to the sewer operating budget, which will go again into reserves, so sewer capital reserves. This slide just speaks to the need for the additional $12,000. It relates to the city's amended operating permit for the treatment plant from the ministry, which has instituted several new conditions that require additional funding to complete. And I've listed some of those there. So again, unless there are any questions, similar resolution that council approve the adjustments, and that the adjustments be approved be offset by a corresponding adjustment to the sewer capital reserve for the year.
The motion, please. Councillor Dunnebeck, second, Councillor Cairns. All in favor? Thank you.
Thanks, council. So this final section here, despite the fact that we just approved the capital and non-capital projects February 5th, there's some new information that's come available. So there's just a few additional changes here. I'm going to run through on the next table here. So the occupational health and safety management that I referred to before, I've got a slide that I'll flip to in a second here. And then the second one is emergency and disaster management implementation. That's grant funded. I'll speak to that a little more. So $40,000 there. And then council chambers furniture, which is reserve funded. I've got a slide on that as well. So I'll just flip to those. And if you have any questions on any of them, please let me know. So as I spoke to earlier, there was a request for a new position to be created for occupational health and safety OH&S advisor. Rather than doing that right away, we're proposing that we utilize $50,000 from reserves and engage a consultant to undertake some work to get an OH&S plan fully developed and ready for implementation. And the whole goal behind this, it plays into the work that's being done on OH&S with regards to the WorkSafe BC core certification. That's a process that we're currently going through. The goal behind that is to reduce our WorkSafe premiums on an annual basis and enhance safety in the workplace. We're anticipating that once core is achieved, we were hoping we had a budget allocation to achieve that in 2023. It's now anticipated that we'll have gone through that process, the audit associated with the core certification by the end of 2024 or early 2025, which could reduce our premiums by about $16,000 on its own. And through the eventual implementation of a full-on OH&S plan that would be implemented out across the operations of the city, the hope is that our WorkSafe premiums will be brought down to that base level, which would reduce our premiums by another $72,000. So there's a potential for up to $90,000 in savings once all of this is put into place.
I have a question.
Please.
Does that mean someone comes in and actually does an assessment of the workplaces?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And again, just additional information. So once Human Resources is ensured the successful implementation of the occupational health and safety plan, and we've achieved the core certification, then the notion of hiring a new position will be brought back to council for consideration through future budget deliberation process. The $40,000 relates to a grant. Earlier this year, a letter was sent to the CAO from the Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, advising that regarding implementation of the Emergency and Disaster Management Act through the Indigenous Engagement Requirements Funding Program. Through that program, the city is going to be provided with $40,000. And there's a engagement requirements through the Act of Municipalities and Regional Districts, including consultation and cooperations with Indigenous governing bodies, the incorporation of available Indigenous knowledge into emergency plans and risk assessments, and consideration of cultural safety across emergency management practices. So this is really just recognition of that $40,000 expenditure. It will be offset by the grant. And we haven't gone through the whole program to determine how that funding is going to be spent, but that will happen early on in the year to kind of set the groundwork as we carry on through the year. The last one was $13,000 for council chambers furniture. Corporate administration had been tasked with looking at replacing the tables that form the horseshoe here in council chambers to enhance the formality of the room. Being conscious of the cost related to the furniture, staff sought an out-of-the-box solution that would fit the dimensions of the room. So there's a bit of a schematic of it there. Supplier identified by staff. It's given the rendering and indicated that due to the width of the room, the furniture would require some modification. And this is before council tonight to just staff's at the point where prior to investing additional time working with the supplier to finalize a project, this is before council for consideration of approval of the budget request. So if there's any questions on any of those three items.
Councillor Kent?
I'm surprised to see a proposal for council chamber furniture. I think that what we have is functional and flexible and meets our needs. And considering all of the demands that we have on our budget, I would support this.
Okay, thanks.
Further, Councillor Denbeck?
Yeah, memory serves me correct, but this is all pretty new stuff.
I think it was like 2019 or so.
Mm-hmm.
It was before COVID,
Yeah.
way before COVID, yeah.
Yeah, 18 maybe.
I think we could take that $13,000 and use it for something other than what we have. This is nice, the fact that we can move it out of the way if we have to or adjust it. The picture I see here looks very cubical and all one piece kind of, which then sort of makes the room a little bit less useful in my opinion. I don't support spending $13,000 to replace something which we essentially have. Those are my 2 bits.
If you don't mind, staff members that are present,
I
are we
see
missing?
Mr. Mayor has. He's got
Okay.
it up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that. So this furniture that we have in there right now, actually, we purchased that at the beginning of COVID. The old setup that we had in council didn't have the physical distancing that was going to be required for COVID, and we had actually no budget to work with at the time. And so this kind of flexible setup was put in place to account for physical distancing. What we have basically is a conference room, not a council chamber. As Jim had mentioned, the whole idea here is to add a little bit of formality to the proceedings. I think that the idea that we're kind of in a conference room belies the responsibility and the decisions and just everything that amounts to what council is doing. And this is a pretty cheap way to take it up a step without getting too opulent. If we've had a look at council chambers all around, I think you will see quite a difference. In any event, COVID's over, and we have an opportunity to enhance our setting a little bit, and I think we should do it.
I've just been looking for a new recliner chair. The one that my husband really likes best is $8,900 for one chair. I remember when we first did this, and we actually changed direction of the room. We had the gallery at this end and the council at the other thing. I felt very uncomfortable because I was safe behind that closed place there. I could put my purse down or my jacket down, and I felt like I was contained there. And I remember thinking that at the time when I came in here, that this didn't feel like a chamber at all. That's just my take on it. I don't think it's particularly expensive for what we need. I can recall putting furniture into my own business before, and it was in the $50,000 range. Councilor Royer?
Well, if we approve this new desk, what's going to happen to the old desk?
I think we'll probably repurpose them, either here in City Hall or elsewhere in the city. I'm not sure that we've thought that far ahead yet.
Councilor Dunderbeck, did you?
Yeah, I just have a hard time believing that you can build this for $13,000. I had a custom built office for my shop, and a place for two people to sit with computers in front of them cost me almost $6,000 2 years ago. So this, I just worry, I guess, if there's money going to be spent and we want it to look like a chamber, then the money should be spent so that it's something that's going to last. So it's like a structure, like that courtroom feeling, I guess, if you will, with the, just a room of power, I guess, like,
Yeah.
and it should look like that. So I feel that $13,000 isn't the real price that it would cost, and I feel like we would be disappointed.
Yeah.
And maybe something in the future, yeah, I could agree, and we could build something up so that we have that feeling that you spoke of, which I concur with, but this doesn't scream that for me.
Any other comments? All right, so what does that leave us? We need to make a decision on the whole thing?
So,
So
Part of it?
if I may,
Yes, go ahead,
so staff, Maurice, I think you've been investigating this. Can you make a comment on the cost, please?
So the cost is for like an out of the box, the different, like, so this is furniture that we purchased. It wasn't custom made for us. So it would be the same idea, but with the privacy panel on the front. We looked at getting some privacy panel for this table, but according to what we had been tasked, we felt that looking at the rendering, it was not going to satisfy what was asked to add more formality to the room. This is and
So, yeah, but I'm referring to the, whether or not this can be done for, the amount. Councilor Dunderbeck is
this is the
questioning whether
quote
it can
that
be
we
done.
have for the furniture and the installation. But like I said, it's an out of the box. It's not custom furniture for this room. So kind of like if we did decide to contact someone that can build us some furniture for this room, the amount would be much bigger than that. So
Yeah, so fair enough. What Councillor Dunderbeck is questioning is whether or not it can be done for the $13,000 or $15,000. What assurances do we have?
Sorry?
What assurances do we have that it's not going to cost any more?
Well, we do have a quote from a supplier, and the supplier is the one that provided that drawing. So in order for us to move ahead with that, we need a budget, and we also need to work with the supplier to change some of the dimension, because when we actually put it in there, like did a layout in the room, we had to do some modification. So, but before we spend any more time on that, there's already been staff time. This was not staff initiated. So before we spend more time on this project, we do need to make sure that council is approve the projects.
So, but Maurice, for clarification, if modifications need to be made, is that included in the cost?
It's actually moved, like the drawing that they provided us, if you look, there's 3 places at the end of the table. And they need to modify
Shape.
the layout of what's gonna happen.
Yeah, fair
Like
enough,
the-
but is that included in the quote?
It is included in the quote.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess, considering what the motion is, we need to decide whether we are going to accept the motion as it is or whether or not we're going to accept the motion excluding. So
Yeah,
do you have anything else to add to this, Jim?
no, this is it. And the way that resolution is worded, if any one of those 3 items, council didn't want to include it, or if you wanted to amend one, I mean, you could just add a sentence onto the end of it saying, approve as detailed in the CFO's presentation with the exception of, or with following changes, something to that effect.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion, please.
So moved as is.
So you're moving it as it is? All right, and a seconder? Councilor Royer seconds. All in favor? And Mayor? In favor? So 3 and 3.
You have a tie vote? That motion is
So that means we do a second motion then for you?
Yep.
So this motion would be that we accept the capital project plan as you suggested, with the exception of the $13,000 for council chamber furniture. Motion, accept that motion? And a seconder, Councillor Cairns, Roy and Cairns. All in favor? All right, that's carried. Okay, Jim, moving on.
Okay, so the next resolution I have here, just to move us forward in the process and to meet the statutory deadlines for the adoption of the various bylaws. The first one is the council directs staff to prepare the 2024 to 2028 5-year financial plan bylaw, and that the bylaw be brought forward at the April 8th, 2024 regular meeting for consideration of first 3 readings.
A mover, please. Councillor Karen, second, Councillor Roy. All in favor? Carried.
And the second resolution is that council directs staff to prepare the 2024 tax rates bylaw, and that the bylaw be brought forward at the April 8th, 2024 regular meeting for consideration of first 3 readings.
Motion, please. Councillor Dunnebeck, second, Councillor Cairns. All in favor?
Thank you, council. And just a note, council is aware that the final approval of the budget isn't achieved until the 5-year financial plan is adopted. So if there newer, better information comes available between now and the time the bylaw comes forward, changes could be incorporated into it if that's council's desire before it's read and
Thank you.
adopted. So
Thank you. Well, all in all, this has been a very, very serious evening. I wish I had a joke to tell.
yeah. Sorry, it was lacking entertainment value for sure. yeah, let's go back to hockey.
So is just last call for anything else for the evening?
I'll just go through next steps here, and then if there's anything else council wants to talk about. So at that April 8th meeting, we'd bring those bylaws forward for first 3 readings in addition to the aquatic center parcel tax. At the April 22nd meeting, we would bring those bylaws forward for council's consideration of adoption. Then towards the middle of May, we would pull everything together, mail out the tax notices, and start budgeting for next year.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor McGuire and second Councillor Dunnebeck. All in favor? And we're done. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, council.
Night all.
Night, Dawn.
Night, Don.